Background in profession. Stanley Ferguson was a prison guard working at Alcatraz during the 1930s, one of the most notorious prisons in the United States. The events of Mob of the Dead are set during this time, revolving around the criminal schemes and escape attempts of four infamous inmates: Albert Weasel Arlington, Billy Handsome, Salvatore Sal DeLuca, and Michael Effin O'Leary. As a prison guard, Ferguson was responsible for maintaining order and security on the island. Alcatraz was known for its strict security measures and its reputation as an inescapable fortress. Ferguson took his job seriously, appearing to be a dutiful man performing his role amid some of the toughest and most dangerous criminals of his time. He was in charge of overseeing the prison and controlling the inmates, who constantly sought to overcome the hardships of prison life. One of these inmates, Albert Arlington, was particularly known for his obsession with escape, attempting to carry out a plan based on building a makeshift aircraft to fly off the island. Ferguson's role in the events of Mob of the Dead. In Mob of the Dead, Stanley Ferguson takes on a narrative role, acting as the voice in the opening sequences and audio logs. He recounts his experiences of the four main characters of Mob of the Dead during their time at Alcatraz and how they eventually planned a prison escape that ended in disaster. Ferguson recalls that Albert Weasel Arlington was somewhat of an outsider among the inmates, while Sal, Finn, and Billy were hardened gangsters who fit the typical profile of Alcatraz prisoners. Arlington was seen as an eccentric dreamer, often ridiculed by others. Arlington had an idea that the others dismissed as completely unrealistic, constructing a flying device to escape the island. Ferguson describes how Arlington eventually convinced Sal, Finn, and Billy to help him with his plan. In the audio logs, Ferguson admits that while he had doubts about Arlington, he was unaware of the true extent of their escape plot. The escape attempt itself was particularly concerning for Ferguson, as he viewed the four prisoners as potentially dangerous. In the original timeline, this escape attempt ended in tragedy. Weasel Arlington was killed by the other three prisoners when they realized that his plan had failed. However, this was not the end of their story. Instead, the four men became trapped in an endless, hellish cycle where they were forced to relive their escape and Arlington's death over and over again, caught in a time loop on Alcatraz. These supernatural events hinted at the manipulative forces of the ether, a recurring element in the zombie storyline. The time loop and Ferguson's involvement. In the time loop of Alcatraz depicted in Mob of the Dead, the events repeat continuously. The four protagonists plan their escape, culminating in a deadly confrontation between them. It becomes increasingly clear that Weasel Arlington is the key to breaking the cycle. Ferguson, though not directly involved in the time loop, is connected to the supernatural events at Alcatraz through his recordings and memories. He serves as a sort of chronicler of these recurring events without fully understanding their true nature. His role reflects the idea that even those who are not directly affected by the events are often entangled in the larger cosmic and metaphysical schemes of the zombie storyline. Ferguson's function as a narrator in the audio logs of Mob of the Dead illustrates how even seemingly ordinary people can come into contact with supernatural forces simply by being near places and events where these powers are at play, without fully grasping their significance. He remains an observer, describing the recurring nature of the events without actively intervening. The larger context of the zombie storyline. Although Stanley Ferguson only plays an active role in Mob of the Dead, his significance in the larger zombie storyline should not be overlooked. Mob of the Dead and its events are closely tied to overarching themes of guilt, punishment, and manipulation by higher powers that permeate the entire ether storyline. The concept of time loops, in which individuals are doomed to repeat their actions endlessly, reflects broader elements of the storyline that appear in other maps and stories. Characters like Richtofen, Dempsey, Nikolai, and Takeo endure similar struggles, where they are forced to confront the consequences of their choices while being manipulated by the cosmic forces of the ether. Ferguson's role as a prison guard and narrator highlights him as someone who witnesses these endless cycles of sin and punishment without being able to interfere in the metaphysical events. He becomes a symbolic figure representing how even those who seem uninvolved can be drawn into the dark secrets and cycles that govern the ether and the zombies universe. Conclusion: the tragedy of Stanley Ferguson. Stanley Ferguson is a fascinating minor character in the zombie storyline whose importance extends beyond his limited role in Mob of the Dead. As a prison guard at Alcatraz, he becomes a silent witness to the tragic and supernatural events that unfold on the prison island. His recollections and memories give players insight into the repeating nature of the four main characters' fates in Mob of the Dead, emphasizing the central theme of guilt and punishment. Although Ferguson himself is not an active player in the metaphysical battle for the ether, he represents the innocent and unaware individuals often drawn into the complex cosmic struggles for power and control. His story reminds us that the impact of these events is far-reaching, and that no one is entirely immune to the manipulations of the dark forces that dominate the zombies universe. Ferguson's tale is a sad one, as he is just another person trapped in a world he doesn't understand, serving as a witness to the catastrophic events unfolding before his eyes.